Good day, everyone. I'm Dr. Slet Renee Griffin. I'm the founder of Williams Hope Publishing. I'm a Gen X speculative fiction writer who write about systems that suppress the African American voice and the African American community. This channel focuses on Black writers who use the art of dystopian fiction to protest systems that suppress the African American voice. So, if that sounds great to you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. In this video, I'm actually going to focus on myself, but not in a conceited way. I'm actually feeling very reflective today. I feel pretty good because I just ordered my author copy of the $10 Million Black Exodus. And so pretty much we talked about our Kickstarter that's happening on April 1st. And so we're really excited about that. And so I'm feeling good and as far as checking off all the boxes and everything. And so I feel good. And this happiness that I feel, it just makes me reflect on the journey that I've been. It makes me reflect back when I actually started writing back in 2010 when I published my first book. And y'all, that book was hot garbage. I was so in a rush to hear the term published author that I didn't do all the things that writers need to do to produce a quality book. I was just so in a hurry. And so I just feel compelled to create a series called My Rookie Author Mistake Series, where I'm actually going to tear apart my 2010 book and I'm going to go through it and discuss all the things that's wrong with the book. So emerging writers don't make the mistakes that I made. And of course, there's some mistakes that you're going to make, but these are like mistakes that scream rookie, you don't know what you're doing type of mistakes. And so I'm going to tear apart my 2010. I can't even believe I'm doing this because it's so embarrassing, but I feel compelled to do this because I just wish if somebody made a video like that back in 2010, I would have been at a better place and the book probably would have been more of a quality. So stick with me and you'll pretty much learn a great deal of what not to do as a writer. So here we go. All right. So this is mistake number one, and it's the biggest mistake that a writer could make, and it's the misalignment of the book cover. So my question is based on my book cover, and yes, I covered up the title because I want you all to guess what the genre is just based on the cover. And yes, the cover is bad. It's very bad. So I want you guys to take a guess. What genre is this book based on the cover? Is it sci-fi? Is it romance? Based on the cover, what do you think the genre is? All right. So I'm going to give a hint. So now there's I removed the cover, and so now you can see the full title: Xavier's Walk, a basketball star's redemption, a basketball star's journey to redemption. So now, based on the title, what do you think the genre of this book? What do you think? All right, so you may know just based on the title, but here's the thing: based on the illustration, you probably had no idea what the genre is. So we're going to go. Ta-da! So this book is Christian urban fiction. Yeah, and Christian urban fiction, is faith-based, dramatic storyline, and it focuses on redemption, which is in our title. So the title, we got the title right as far as aligning with the genre. but clearly the illustration is off because as a reader, the reader is not going to connect that this book is Christian urban based on the photo illustration on the cover. And that's a big no-no because you can have a great story, but that story will not be told if the reader doesn't even pick up your book. So that's the biggest mistake that I made as as a writer. And in hindsight, looking back, is something that the publisher should have picked up. But my I went to my friend. He had his own publishing company, and he didn't know. I mean, he knew just as much as I knew, which was nothing about the publishing industry, about what a quality book needs to look like, what a quality book should feel like. And so, you didn't do your research, and this is what you end up with as a writer. So clearly, you know, the the issues with this book started with the cover. And I'm gonna tell you what I did. Basically, I bought a basketball jersey and I laid it on an iron board. If you look at the sleeves, you can see the iron board coming out of the sleeves. And then I took the iron board and laid it on the floor. And I took a picture with my iPhone, and that's what I used to get the cover. I know, cringe, cringe, cringe. And here's the thing, you know, the book was published in 2010, but see, I'm not an early adopter, which means my phone that I used was probably 2006. So it was a real old phone when I took this picture. So this is things that you don't do as a writer. You don't use your iPhone for a cover. All right. So I went and just did a quick Google search on the internet just to look at some Christian urban authors. And these are the books that I came up with. I mean, that I just found. And clearly, when you look at these covers, you have Lady Elect, by Nakia Lynette Nichols. You have The Light on Hazley Street by Vanessa Miller. Then you have A Pimps in the Pulpit, a novel, God Ain't Sleep by Rod Palmer. That sounds like a good book. I may have to get that one right there. Our Church Out by Michelle Lynch. See, these, if you look at the covers, you already know, yeah, it's Christian urban. No doubt. No doubt. So when you throw my book in the mix, does my book cover fit the Christian urban genre? And clearly, when you look at my book, the answer is no. It's such a misalignment. So when my book is on a shelf, on a Christian urban fiction genre shelf, it doesn't look like a pimp in a pulpit. It doesn't have to feel like it's Christian urban. And that's the problem, which means if someone's looking to read a Christian urban book, they're not going to pick up Xavier's Walk because it doesn't fit. The title does. If you just based on the title, Xavier's Walk, A Basketball Star's Journey to Redemption, the title fits perfectly. It fits in with the rest of the books, All Churched Out, A Pimp in the Pulpit. Yeah, the titles fit, but once you look at the cover and then the quality of the cover, yeah, it doesn't fit. So it's a big mistake on my part that I, used what I call it the cheap route to try to get a cover because I was so in a rush to get published. I was so in a rush to be called a published author that I didn't do my homework. And I, put the responsibility on my friend, the publisher, to do all the things that I should have done as an author. I assumed that if I don't have the knowledge, well, I'm gonna let the publisher handle that, and that's wrong. And then the publisher, my friend, he didn't know. And so this is what you get. So it's very important as a writer, you have to do your work. You have to know what your cover needs to look like in the genre that you're writing in. And that's something I failed in 2010. And another thing that I failed to realize as a writer back in 2010, that there are color palettes that are associated with genres, which I didn't know. So if you're writing, in the thriller genre, the romance, young adult, there are colors that needs to be associated, in that genre when you put together your book cover. That I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue. And if you look, Christian fiction, we're gonna go right to Christian fiction. You got serene, light blue, and gold, and and not to say that these colors are set in stone, because you have some books that have blended genres, and so you're going to see a mix. But the point is, your cover has to reflect, the colors on your cover has to reflect what's in the genre. And so when we look at Xavier's Walk, okay, so this supposed to be Christian urban fiction. So we're going to look into Christian fiction. We got serene, the light blue. There's nothing in this cover that's serene, that's gold. There's nothing in this cover that screams, Christian urban. When we go back and, when we look at, you know, I, I can't go back for some reason. But anyway, it's very important that your cover has to align, what's in the genre. And our upcoming book, the $10 million Black Exodus, this is what an alignment looks like. Okay. So when you look at this cover, what genre is it in? Okay. So right away, if you're not even a fan of it, based on the cover, based on the drone or the little the we call it little spaceship, or whatever you want to call it, right away this is science fiction. Right away it's science fiction. And when you look at the color, we got the blues, the futuristic blues, the metallic, what they call electric, those electric blue, those are colors that speak to science fiction. And also, the $10 million Exodus is also a dystopian. So when we look on a color palette for a dystopian, you got the burnt orange, you got the, let's say, dark gray, you got the olive. Those colors are reflected in our cover. Now we got the burnt orange, we got some of the reds, and then it says black. We got our silhouette figure, who's the main author, main character in the book. It's black. So clearly, again, the $10 million Exodus checks the box, even from dystopian genre. And lastly, the book also touches into Afrofuturism, where it has the golds and the reds and the blues. And so the cover stretches into three genres, and it checks all the box of making sure that it aligns with the genre. And when I look back with Xavier's Walk, basically, like I said, I just took my iPhone, snap, but this cover was professionally done. And of course, it's obvious that's professionally done. And so it's very important that as a writer, you got to keep that in mind, that the colors you put on your cover, it's got to reflect the genre, because you don't want to confuse readers. Okay, so now that I beat myself up, pretty much on the cover, these are the things that went wrong with the cover. Okay, first, The photo, the illustration, it just didn't align with the genre. We saw that it was, light blue, they're serene. There's nothing in this cover that says serene. If I would do the cover all over again, I would have a silhouette of a guy, maybe shooting, maybe he's shooting, and then you have like the clouds, maybe some type of sun rays, like heavenly, similar to what Church Out had, all Church Out covers, something similar to that, where because at some point he does what I call he change or becomes delivered, redeemed. And so that you want to actually have that reflected in the cover. So if I were to do Xavier's Walk cover all over again, I would probably do something like that, because clearly a basketball jersey, I can't believe I even did this, but a basketball jersey does not scream redemption. None whatsoever. So you're a writer. Please don't use your iPhone. Just don't use your iPhone. Okay. Another reason, of course, that this cover doesn't align. Clearly, the photos even is poor quality, and you can tell it doesn't have that sharpness to it compared to the other covers that we saw with the Christian urban authors. The cover is just is flat. It doesn't even do anything to draw the reader in. They even want to pick up the book. And the font cover, the font, we didn't even talk about the font, but the font doesn't even align with not only with the genre, but the font doesn't even align with the industry. And I can look at the font, I can tell you what it is. It's Time Roman. Time Roman font does not go on a book cover, any book cover, period. And that's a big no-no. That screams, I'm self-published. I don't know what I'm doing. And even a publisher, should have picked that up. But my friend he wasn't knowledgeable in the industry to even know that. He basically just uploaded the book to Amazon, which I could have done myself. So as a publisher, he should have looked at it and be like, no, that's not even industry standard. You don't put Times Roman font on a cover because it just is unpolished, as you can see, based on the other covers. And so that's embarrassing too. Even, we look at the title, like, the title. Well, let's start with the title. You got the title going, you got a title going, uh, up and down. You got to go on the vertical. And we lead, when people read, we read left to right. So that title should have been going right across the page, right across the cover. Because when you pick up a book, that's how that's how you read it. And so, your eyes is having to go down, and then to read the subtitle, you're going left to right. So that's a lot of work for your eyes. If you're trying to, get that reader to pick up the book, not only pick it up, to open up the book, you want to make it easy as possible, make them entice enough to want to open the book. But yeah, they got the title going down, and then you got a subtitle going across. It looks crazy now that I'm really looking at it. And the subtitle, it's small, it's Times Roman, the name, but see, the font, the font is supposed to add to the mood of the book. Yeah, it's not just that a font. There's a reason that the font's supposed to add mood to the book. Times Roman does nothing, and that's why it doesn't belong on the cover. And last but not least, as far as what I did wrong, when I was actually putting together this video, I didn't realize that the word stars is missing an apostrophe. It should be a basketball stars, STAR apostrophe S. I just realized that when I was putting the video together. So that was a boo-boo. And that's something the publisher should have picked up. I should have picked up, but you think the publisher is the last eyes, before it was uploaded. he didn't even pick it up, or probably didn't look at it, just went and uploaded. So, those are all the horrible things that this cover just speak to. So, as a writer, these are the things you don't want to do, and these are things you need to look out for. So now that I beat myself up and I feel real bad, there's two things that I did right. The title. So the title did align with the Christian urban fiction. So I feel good about that. That the title was good, and miraculously, I got the trim size right. So in Christian urban fiction, the standard size is 5 by 5, by 8 by 5, for the paperback. And if I was publishing a hardcover, it would have been a 6 by 9. So at least I got those two things right, and that's the only things I got right, from this book. So, it's just very, very important to understand the heavy lifting that your cover can do, you know, when you get it right. So our next segment we're gonna talk about the book description in the back of the book. And yeah, it gets worse, y'all. So let's come with me and we can learn something. All right. So now we're gonna discuss the other issue dealing with our cover, and it's the back cover where we have our description. And yeah, I told you it was bad. And so I covered the ISBN. It's really, I hope you guys don't buy the book. It's well, I'm sure just based on the cover you probably won't, but I don't know. I just felt compelled to cover the ISBN. I mean, anyway. So this is the description, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's bad, and really in this description, I pretty much gave away the plot, and that's something you don't do as a writer. You want to write enough where you're not giving away the whole store, but you want to write that description where it intrigues or pique the reader's interest to at least open up the book and really just begin to thumb through it, and so. I'm talking about if you're in a bookstore, but even online, you want to, at least pique the reader's interest, so they'll at least go in and see what's inside. But here, I mean, it's horrible. It's the description is poorly written. It goes into detail, and it doesn't really say the things that would really resonate someone to even pick up the book. And like I said, it's too much information. Yeah, the plot was pretty much mentioned in here, and as far as the font, we talked about Times Roman. Uh, Times Roman does not belong on the cover, and even you know this in your description, it's just unprofessional. And again, it's just the font size is real big if you notice. It screams self-published, and of course at the top it says novel. The reader knows pretty much it's a novel, so it's not something you have to put on there. But there it is, and that's something the publisher did. I clearly didn't do that. But again, you know when when you're working with someone who don't know the industry, this is what you get. And I didn't know anything about the industry, he didn't know, and so you get a hot mess of a product, when you don't know. And and speaking of publisher information, even on the back of the book, there's nothing on here that has the publisher's information. So he didn't even put his company on here. So it's like, why is that? But to me, it just signals really self-published. Because even with my book, The $10 Million Exodus, my publishing logo is on the back of the $10 Million Black Exodus. So at least the reader will know, okay, well, this is who the publisher is. But on Xavier's Walk, you don't know who the publisher is unless you open up the book and look at a copyright page. And even the copyright page in Xavier's Walk is all jacked up. But we'll talk about that in another video. So this is the back cover mistakes. You don't want to give away the plot. That's not what you want to do as a writer. You want to have it written where it's intriguing, where the reader will want to open up the book at this point, because if they made it to the back of the book, that means that that's an interest. So if they, you want to make sure that that's well written, so they will want to open up the book, or want to see what's inside. The font size is horrible because it's Time Roman. We already talked about that, and the publisher's information is missing. And so, yeah, this it's bad. It's very bad. And so another thing I wanted to point out, and I tried to take a picture of it, clearly on the spine. The spine is not great either, but that's what happens when you use Time Roman and the subtitle's missing. Now remember, we had our title, Xavier's Walk, and then, the subtitle, let me pick it up here. The subtitle is a basketball star's journey to redemption. So a basketball star's journey to redemption is missing. That should be on the spine because it's part of the title. Even if the font would have been small enough to get that in there, but the publisher did not include it in there for some reason, probably because it was long and I felt, well, I can't fit it in there, so I'm just going to omit it. So basically, you got a book that doesn't even have the subtitle. So and that's not good either. So that's another reason why this book is it's not great. And we talked about the font type and the font size. So it reeks self-published, and that's what happens when, as a writer, you don't do your research and you rely on other people. I mean, you rely on people who are professionals. And let me just stress that for a minute, because the person I relied on was not a professional at all. And he pretty much just called himself a publisher. But when he called himself a publisher, I assumed that he had some type of industry knowledge, but he didn't. He knew just as much as I knew. And so me as a writer, again, I should have done my own research, and I didn't. So really, all the mistakes that's in this book, they all fall on me as the author, because my name is on the book. His name is not on the book. My name is on the book. And so anytime a publisher, uh, helps put it together, their name is not on the book. And so the book always stops with the writer, with the writer. So it's very important that you do your research, because you want the end product to represent you. You want the end product to represent your brand. And clearly, Xavier's Walk is horrible. It's so it's embarrassing, but I'm glad I'm putting this video together, because it's good to see what a horrible book looks like, and it really explains why people who they actually paid their money to read this book, and I didn't get any feedback from the book. So that's a sign, and I can see why I didn't get any feedback, because it's horrible. The cover is horrible, the back cover is worse, and we didn't even open up the first page yet. We didn't even get to the copyright page, the title page. So it gets worse. But you have to tear a book apart to understand what's wrong. So as a writer, you don't do that again. You don't ever repeat that mistake. And so now, since we discussed the covers, the cover, the front cover and the back cover, the next video we're going to talk about is the paper and the formatting. So that's going to be the next step. And this is where it really gets messy in Xavier's Walk. But It's a learning process, and again, it's something that we're learning now, so we don't ever have to repeat this mistake as an author. So let's go to the next segment. All right. So now we are going to talk about paper, the color of paper that we use to publish our novels. Did you know that the cream paper and white paper represents the type of book that you're going to publish? So if you are writing a fiction novel, typically fiction novels are published on cream paper. Yeah, I did not know this, and obviously my publisher did not know this either. So when you are publishing a fiction novel, romance, sci-fi, whatever that fiction genre is, typically it's on cream paper, not white. White screams, I'm self published and I had no clue. So, and I'm going to pick up a fiction book. Here's Toni Morrison's Beloved. Yes, it's fiction. Great book. And so when you stack this book, Toni book, on top of Xavier's Walk, you can see the color difference. Okay. Typically the big five publishers, they publish fiction on cream. It's not that bright white that's used for nonfiction. Okay, another book that I've read, another fiction book, Zora Neale Hurston's book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. See the difference? See the color? Xavier's Walk has the bright white paper, and Zora Neale Hurston's book, fiction, has that cream. All right. Even another oldie but goodie, George Orwell's book, 1984. It's probably a little harder to see, but even George's book, and yeah, it's probably a little harder to see here, but George's book even has, it even has a tint. But, you know, it's in a pretty much it's more convention than a standard rule, but there's a reader's expectation when they pick up a fiction book. A fiction book is typically, it has to have, it's cream because it's easier on the eyes. And so the white paper for nonfiction, it's for that text to pop, to highlight the text, the graphs, and all those things that are, in nonfiction. And so, of course, there are exceptions because there are also nonfiction books that print on cream. Okay, and those are like sometimes your non-narrative fiction books, and that's like maybe, yeah, for example, like Kamala Harris's book, The 107 Days, which I have here, and you probably can't see it, but her book is not the bright white. Her book, the paper is cream. It's probably harder to see it on the screen, but her paper, it's not that, it's not the, you probably can't, yeah, it's probably harder to see it, but it's not the bright white that you typically see in nonfiction. So her book, falls into that exception. But there are nonfiction books that print on cream, so they go back and forth. But that depends on the reader's genre. So here it is, Xavier's Walk, printed on the bright white paper, and I didn't know that, and neither did my friend who published it. So basically, when he uploaded this to Amazon, when he was checking which paper to use, he checked the white paper, not knowing that for fiction books, the paper is it should be cream. So I didn't know that, and he didn't know that either, which it goes back to what I was saying about writers. We have to know what the industry standard is within our genre. And so as a writer, that's something I should have known, but I didn't. So if you guys didn't know that, make sure that, when you write your next fiction book, make sure you're using cream paper and not the white. So that's the end of the paper segment. And so now we're going to go ahead and talk about all the formatting issues that's wrong with Xavier's Walk. So let's go and check that out. Now we are at the point of the video where we're going to talk about the formatting. And I hope that you guys are able to see it, because I know some of the stuff is going to be hard to present because on the screen. So I'm gonna try my best to make sure that you guys are able to see it. But so when we're talking about formatting issues, there are things in Xavier's Walk that it's cringe. It's so cringe. But I'm even going back and forth to. I don't even know if I would even want to show you guys this, because that's how bad this is. But I'm going to do it because as I said earlier in the video, if I saw a video like the one I'm recording, it would have saved a lot of heartache, and I would have been in a better position to position the book. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this. So the first page is not so much the first page, and I have some personal writing on here. So the first page is not I mean, that's okay. But when you record, your front matter, you don't print your front matter front to back. You don't print on both sides on the front matter. So, and that's what this is. So you have your title page, but then right on the second, you got the title, and then so basically, he printed front back, which you don't, which you don't do, okay. And so you have, this should have been printed on his own page, but he print front back, which you don't do. That's obvious. Scream self-published. It should have been a blank page. So there are no blank, no blank pages. There's no dedication page. There's none of that in the front matter. Basically, you got the title page that's print on both sides, which you don't do. Okay, that's a no. And something that I just discovered, which is more embarrassing. There's page numbers. See that? That's a page number. So he started the page numbers, and I'm trying to hide the publisher's name, but he started the page numbers on the front matter, which you don't do. Okay. And so there's no, yeah, so you got page numbers up here. You can see the page numbers. Yeah, that's the front matter. You got page numbers. Then this is, it goes right into the story. It goes right into the story. There's no blank pages. And so you got the page number up here, and look with the chapter headings. There's no separation with the chapter headings. There's no there's the author name, there's no title. the author name. There's no the book title that's not in the headings. It's just it's just there's no there's no no headings. Formatting is bad, and probably something that you notice again. There's no indentation, and you probably can't see it. Every person that speaks, they don't get it. There's no indentation, so it look like the same person is just talking. I know it's so hard to see. It's so hard to see. But yeah, if you take this, so we look at chapter 5. Yep. So that's a big no no. That's a big no no. And again, that's something the publisher should have known. But then again, if this book had been edited, that would have been picked up immediately by an editor. Immediately by an editor. And so that's that's a mistake, a huge mistake, from an editing perspective. But and then you have the separation breaks, that shows there's a change in someone that's speaking. That's even, I mean, that could have been, he left the hashtag, that should have been replaced with something more elegant. Left it right in there. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Another issue was that you have one whole page. There's one whole page that's in italics because I was trying to show uh, a backstory, or this person just rethinking about something that happened to him in the past. But you got a whole page of italics. And when you got too much italics, that's hard on the eyes too. And so that was another distraction. And there's pages of pages of pages of italics. And so it's just such a distraction, as a reader. And so the formatting is wrong. The formatting is just off. You got the page numbers. That's you got page numbers that started in the front matter, which is horrendous, absolutely horrendous. I'm just trying to show other stuff in here, but yeah, the clearly, the one of the biggest mistakes, we've seen, is just that the page numbers started right on the front matter. I see, it's just it's nuts. But that's something you don't do. Each person that speak, should be indented. It's not. So this book, you know, would have been so hard for a reader because you can't tell who's speaking. It shifts, and so layout, the formatting and layout, the typesetting, all of that helps the reader experience. And this book wasn't even typeset to even support that. So again, when you talk about a horrible book, Xavier Walk is an example of it because it's hard for the reader to enjoy the story because the way the book is laid out. And so the layout supports the story. So that's something that as a writer that you have to really invest in, because you can have a great story, but if the layout is where the reader can't tell who's speaking, the reader can't tell if the character is having a flashback or if they're talking in the past or the present, there's a way where that can be communicated, through different types of fonts. um, there's a way that that can be communicated without it being so overbearing where the reader doesn't know if the character is talking about the present or the past. And so in Xavier's Walk, I have pages of pages where it's written in italics. And that is a no-no. So, and I know it's probably was hard, but I'm sure you guys, I mean, look on the top of the heading. You got there's no title, there's no titles of the book, there's no author title. It's 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 a mess. Okay, and I'm just gonna leave it there because I'm getting upset now. But this is what you don't do as a writer, and that's why I'm just going back to say that the responsibility falls on the writer, because you have to know what the book is supposed to look like. You got to know what the layout is supposed to look like, what the industry standard is within your genre. So, I had to learn the hard way, but that's why I'm making this video. So you as a writer, don't make that mistakes. And so make sure, even if you have no idea how to lay out the book. That's why there's professionals that know what your book's supposed to look like within the genre. Okay. So those are the people you want to lean on. And so, don't make the mistake that I did. I took the shortcut. I wanted to be published so badly that I wasn't willing to pay for a professional who has the experience and who can say that, these are the previous books that I've done in the past. And so I didn't do that. I just figured this is my friend. He knew what he was doing. And I took the shortcut and I got burned. So don't let that happen to you. All right. So you made it this far. And yes, we discussed a lot about all the things that were wrong with Xavier's Walk, and it was painstaking for me just to relive the pain of why this book is so bad, and really just learning some other stuff about what was wrong with the book, such as the spine missing the subtitle, and the page numbers that were on the front matter that was new to me. And so I hope that you just took everything that's in this video and make sure that you as a writer don't make those same mistakes, because a lot of it screams, self-published. And not to say that there's something wrong with the self-publishing, because it's not, because that's what I am a self-published author. But there are things that you can do to position your book to make it the best it can be, to make it the best story that it can be, by avoiding some of the things that I did. When my 2010 book was published, we talked about the cover. We talked about the paper, printing on cream paper, as far as making sure the book cover is a quality, make sure that the book cover fits in the genre that you're writing in. And really, it just goes back to doing your research as a writer to understand what expectations are required in the genre that you're writing in. That's really what it all boils down to. So that's the biggest lesson that I learned when when I published Xavier's Walk, and just now, just looking back, and just some of the things that I should have done, I should have known, but I'm not going to beat myself up, because you don't know what you don't know, and you have to rely on professionals to get that information that you to have. And I didn't do that. I try to take the shortcut, and so there's no shortcut to quality. As a writer, we got to take the long road, and whatever information that we don't have, that's where the professionals come in. And so, and I, as far as editing, there was no editing process in this book, and it showed. It showed very, very badly. So, there are things I could have done. I could have had a beta reader, because a beta reader probably would have stopped at the first page and said, "This is garbage, and you need to rewrite this." So, you know, just use resources that are available to us now as self writers. And so, and make sure that if you're publishing, make sure you're using someone that's proven, that knows what they're doing in the industry. And so, but I advocate that, if you're writing your own stories, you need to publish your own stories, because you need to have control over how your work is being distributed. And I may just do another video on that, because I just believe that we need to control our own work as writers, as opposed to going through another person. But I know, that's, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but that's just me. So thank you for sticking around. I hope you learned something, from my mistake back in 2010. And, if this video resonated with you, go ahead and just like it, share it with your other writers, so you guys can laugh and say, "Hey, just don't do this." So thank you for sticking around, and I will see you guys in the next video.